Hello and welcome to the North Star Podcast. This is Nick Ritter. In this episode, we continue with our exploration of the poem Völuspá, beginning with a discussion of the Norns and the nature of time. From there, our exploration segues into the concepts of law and örlög, the relationship between wyrd and the gods, and the meanings of fate and war. We hope you enjoy the conversation. So, last time we left off right after the ensouling, or whatever we would want to call it, of Ask and Embla, stanza 18.
All right, so stanza 8. Yep, that's where we were. So, you should go on then?
Yeah, let's go on. One of the things that interests me about this is that, poetry as a way of memorizing texts means that it's often very useful to have linkages between one stanza and another so you can remember what follows. So you're just talking about Ask and Embla, and then the very next stanza starts with Asque textanda, which I've always taken as being intentional.
Sure. Feels like it's almost got to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bellows, I guess that's his name, has it as an ash, I know, Yggdrasil its name. With water white is the great tree wet. Thence come the dews that fall in the dales. Green by Urðr's well, does it ever grow? So right there, we have now gone from people being made out of trees to there being another tree.
And in the Old Norse, it's not white with water, it's hvita aure, so like white mud.
So white mud, but that's still where the dew comes from?
Mm-hmm. Or the branches themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because isn't it in, is it Grimnismal where he's talking about the waters flowing out from the boughs and the antlers of the heart down into the Huergamur?
Yep, that's right. So, just so I can remember where we're at. Asquetextanda heter Yggdrasil, harpað mrás en hvita ári, þaðan koma doggar þar sín dalafalla, stendra yfir grön urðarbrunni. So, an ash, I know, standing, I think that's also kind of an intentional contrast with the rootless trees that we were talking about just before, called Yggdrasil, which of course means not Ugg's steed or Ugg's horse, but the Ugg horse. So, the awe horse, something like that. The Urðr is related to the words awe and ugly. So something like, the terror horse, something like that. And there are theories about, I think hippodendron is the term, where you have a horse that's also a tree. And I've seen some theories that say that, the horse and the tree and Odin are all the same thing. So that's a trippy image.
Yeah, what would be the significance of that? That seems interesting.
I've given this some thought, and one of the things that I think is that through hanging himself on the tree, Odin kind of unites with the tree in some fashion.
That part, yeah, makes sense. That tracks.
And you can also see that through the fact that, among the Saxons, there was this pillar called Irminsul that was supposed to be kind of the great world pillar, but it also includes a name, Irmin, that it means like great or universal or something like that. But that in Old Norse, or the Old Norse cognate for it, Jormunr, is a name for Odin.
Yeah, that's led. Some people then have said that the name is just a name for Odin in Irminsul.
Mm-hmm.
Others, Jan de Vries, postulated a god Irmin, who is like the Germanic version of Aryaman.
Yep, and the Irish Aramon.
Okay. And then the other options is it means.
It could mean big pillar. That's true. Right.
It could be associated with pretty much anyone.
Mm-hmm. There's a whole field of theory here. But an ash standing called Yggdrasil, a high tree, is it sprinkled with white mud, I believe. Thence Thence come the dews that fall in the dales. Standra over grön Urðarbrunne, stands forever green over the Well of Urðr. And then after that, we have the introduction of the Norns.
But it's the tree standing green.
Yeah.
Okay, so because the way that this translation takes it, it could be that it's the dews that fall in the dales that are green by Earth's will, right? The way that the translation is, but that's...
I don't think so. I think that in the Old Norse, stender over grön, and it stands green forever over if you want to reorder those, which you do in poetry, right? But I think the grön there refers to the tree.
Yeah, it does say does never go, so that it's got to be the tree. So yeah, okay. All right. And then we get the maidens, whoever they are.
Yeah, so Þaðan koma maujar, marksvitandi, thence come the maidens greatly knowing, I think would be the best way to translate that. Triar úr þeim særun þolle stendur. Tree out of the sea that stands under the trunk, the bowl, the tree itself, however you want to...
Tree from the what?
From the sea.
Sea.
Yeah.
Bellows has dwelling.
Yeah.
It's green from the dwelling down beneath the tree.
Oh, Regius is say instead of Sol.
Oh, yes.
So it's either sea or dwelling, depending upon
sea or
manuscript you're starting.
Sea or hall. Right. So I always associated that with you have the dews falling into the dales, and you have the tree standing forever green over Urð's well, and saying that from that well, which he's calling a sea, or that Codex Regius is calling a sea, that's where the Norns are coming from.
And it does say that Story's prose paraphrase indicates Sol as well.
Okay.
So, okay. So, either way, so like they actually are coming out of the well is what you're saying.
That's how I've interpreted it, yeah.
So, in the translation that we have here, bellows, thence come the maidens, mighty in wisdom, three from the dwelling, or sea, down neath the tree.
Yeah, I think that's right. Urðr heito eina. One is called Urðr. We could talk a little bit about the etymology of that name in a second. Aðra Verðandi, the other Verðandi. Skaro on skíði, they scored upon sticks. Skuld and Skuld the third. So Urðr and Verðandi are two forms of the same verb, verða. Urðr is I think that's the past participle. It means basically, if we want to translate verða as, to worth or to become or to turn, which would be the original meaning, I think, to turn, then Urðr means like turned or became. And verðandi is the present participle, so it means turning or becoming. And then they scored upon sticks, Skuld the third. So Skuld is, from a different verb or noun, a root that means either should or shall.
Yeah.
It's actually related to the words should and shall, or something like debt.
Mm.
Oh, like...
or even guilt.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, guilt and debt are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And in
Germanic languages.
Obviously, guilt doesn't. But
right.
The word for guilt in languages like German words.
Schuld, yeah.
So became, becoming, and should.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there, of course, this is maybe a little bit of a place where you jump off a little into time, right?
Right.
Obviously, as we're going to see, these people have to do with time and causality and whatever. And it's notable that their names come from two different verbs, that past and present have one verb. Skuld is very different. And this has led to the kind of thinking that says that Germanic people didn't have a future, which I don't think is quite the right way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But that Germanic people had a concept of the future as qualitatively different from past or present. present is sort of the leading edge of the past, and the future is something that can come to be. But the past is, the present is the thing that is becoming, right? And then the future is what it is.
Right.
Right. Doubly curious, though, is that wyrd or urðr, while it is associated with the past, it is also the word that is used for fate, which most people think of what is set to happen to you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That is a curious thing. And this goes back, I guess, to what we were saying about örlög earlier, right?
Yeah.
This sense that fate is really sort of like a particularly weighty sort of causality from the past. I think that's
Right.
the way I want to say it.
Right.
If you're fated to do something, it's not because someone wrote it, in a book or something. It's maybe these women scored it on staves, but there's still this idea that what you're fated to do is something that comes because of the past. There's not a disconnect. It's not that you're fated to do things just because they're scored on staves with no causality behind it.
Sure.
You're fated to do things because the past has a certain weight and it catches up with you.
The fate in the sense of wyrd is something that comes from the beginning of a thing.
Right. Or the earlier part of the thing anyway. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's all sorts of digressions we could do here. I mean, Paul Bauschat's The Well in the Tree. This is where a lot of the idea comes from that you were alluding to about Germanic languages not having a sense of the present. And I think that if we're going to
Of the future.
Sorry, let's edit that part out.
But
But
we keep that.
we keep that.
When Ritter makes a mistake about language, we have to keep it.
That's
It's
true.
such a
Document it,
rare
yeah.
thing.
Someday that little splice of audio will be worth millions.
Yeah.
No, didn't have a sense of the present. If we subscribe to the linguistic relativity theory, which I do because it makes the world a more interesting place, then the form of the language that you speak kind of controls how, not necessarily controls how you think about things, but shapes how you think about things, right?
Mhm.
Germanic languages have a present tense and a past tense, and they have a couple of different ways of talking about the past. One has, what we call the past tense or the preterite is just this action happened in the past, pure and simple. There are different participle constructions where, there's an implication of a past. This has happened, which really means, if you get down to the nitty gritty of it, in the present moment, this action is complete, right? And then you have the same construction with a past verb. This had happened, which meant that in the past, this action was complete, right? There's no simple way to talk about the future in Germanic languages. You always have to use helper verbs that always end up meaning something else in a present sense. So to say this will happen, will literally means to want to.
Yeah.
Right? To have the will to. So saying this will happen means this wants to happen. In the present tense, this wants to happen.
Yeah.
Or this should or shall happen.
Or would, yeah.
Right? Shall literally means debt. It's from that same root that we get Skuld. And it means it should happen. Again, it's a present tense that's implying a future. I think, Gary, that you're right in saying that the Germanic people must have had some sense of something occurring after now. Otherwise, there's no way to plan anything.
Right.
And
Well, and even though you have to use a multi-word construction to do it, you can talk about the future.
Yeah.
Or you can, you can use present tense in a way that implies the future. Right.
Right.
I mean, sort of tonight we ride or whatever.
Sure.
So obviously there is a sense of a future, and you can put together all kinds of modal forms to make it right. You can even have a future perfect if you want, even in Germanic.
Yes.
This will have been done, or will have happened. Yeah. But there is something different in that there's like a simple past, a simple future, a simple present, but no simple future.
Right. Which I think shows, and this is, I think, Bauschatz's main theory, or what I find useful about Bauschatz's theory is that, like you said, there's a qualitative difference there. The past and the present are real, they're solid, whereas the future is not. By its very nature, it's fuzzy. There are different probabilities that could occur.
Except, of course, when it's, fated. I'm going to do air quotes, but that doesn't do us any good on a podcast.
True.
When it's your wyrd that this happens, right? Wyrd, which is the strongest.
So another thing that's, I think, useful to bring up here is that we have this folkloric motif of like the three fates or the three fairies, and sometimes it's more than three, sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 9. And, you take a story like Sleeping Beauty, for instance. It's always the last one to arrive who gives the worst fate, right? Grimm talks about this, I believe. Jan de Vries might as well. Grimm definitely does. But Grimm relates this to the Norns, right? To this idea that it's the youngest of the three, Skuld, who gives the worst fate. Because what is the one thing that is absolutely certain about everyone who's born? It's that they're going to die, right? That's the one thing that is coming.
It's in all of our futures,
you cannot get away from. So I think that idea, and I think that this also ties into the fact that Skuld is named among the Valkyries later on in the poem in a few stanzas, that this alludes to the fact that this kind of futurity, the solid parts of it at least, are not very pleasant.
Right. Or at least it has the potential not to be.
Correct.
I mean,
it's the most to be feared out of the three.
Yeah, we have to believe that some people's futures don't suck.
Yeah.
And yet I think we have to believe that all people's futures are somehow or another related to Skuld.
Right. And everyone's future includes death.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So at least, so there is that. Skuld is going to have to be associated with death.
Right.
And so, Skuld will be scary for everyone in that way.
Right. And a thing that, if we want to get a little more into the weeds in terms of time and causality, one of the things that I think that is useful in trying to understand these three concepts, the Norns, and I wouldn't say the concepts they represent, because I don't want to turn the Norns just into symbols of another thing, right?
Right.
So maybe the ideas that they are, or another abstract way of talking about what they are, is that rather than separating time out from being as a whole, because a lot of people like to talk about, Urðr is the past, Verðandi is the present, Skuld is the future. I think that a better way to think of it is that Urðr, wyrd, is the entirety of manifested reality. It's everything that's already happened. It's the results of all actions that have occurred.
Or to say it more simply, it's what is.
It's what is, right? Verðandi would be that thin edge between what has already become and what is becoming, or it is what is becoming, right? It's what's passing into or coming into being, right?
Yeah, and it you might think of it, if wyrd is what is, right, and yet, or maybe to go back to the actual, it's what has turned out. Let's say it like that. Then Verðandi would be how we're turning it now.
Yes.
Right, and that I'm struggling to use verbs that are closely related to what's originally there without adding baggage, and it's not working very well. So maybe we do go back to, we could say wyrd is being, and Verðandi is what is becoming from that being, though, right? It's sort of the intersection between what is and will, you might say.
Yeah.
Will is in human will, not will is in what's coming or something, although that too.
Oh,
But when right now, if I'm deciding I want to do something, I can't change the past. I can only start changing things in the present.
right.
Any change I'm making, I'm doing in the present, after which it becomes past.
Sure.
And indeed, this is this is where I and maybe this is, I've read too much Heidegger or something. The problem I have, like with bow shots, and maybe it's not a problem with bow shots, but with certain heathens I've encountered in the past who I think didn't fully understand bow shots and took it too seriously in their less than fully understanding state. I'd have people admonish me when I said I was going to do something in the future. We're heathens. We don't have a future, right? Well, yeah, actually, we do have a future. All actions are projected forward, right?
Yeah.
They're projected from behind, perhaps, but we are always projecting into the future. That's any action I take is futural. If I'm thinking right now, I'm going to pick up a glass of water, if I had one, but the hospitality around here is terrible. If I had a glass of water and I'm thinking I'm going to pick that up, what I'm thinking is in a moment, I'm going to drink that, right?
Mhm.
When I start picking it up, I'm taking an action to in a moment drink it. What does in a moment mean? It means in the future, not very far in the future, but in the future.
Right.
Recording this podcast. This is not a past-based action. Yes, there's a past to it. But recording this obviously is because I have this idea that we're going to, in the future, put it online and people will listen to it.
Right.
We hope.
I think
And if you are, thank you.
I think we're kind of coming up on on an idea that we talked about last time, which is the tree kind of representing time, and we were talking about Ask and Embla, and the being of a tree is always kind of branching out. It's happening, and it has like a sense of architecture that it's going to go in, but it's not.
Yeah. So, and I'm trying to remember if that comes directly out of Bauschatz's too, but the idea that everything that you can see about a tree is that tree's weird, right? Is that tree's, it's the urðr of the tree, because it's the result of all of the growth and all of the decay and all of the breakage and everything that's already happened. The Verðandi would be that thin green edge where it's growing. And the Skuld would be like the different potentialities of where that tree might grow in the future. Now you can't say that an oak tree is going to grow like a pine. So the Skuld of an oak tree is going to be different from that of a pine, right? You can't change it, in the tree as it's growing, but you can say this tree is going to grow vaguely in this way if you wanted to try and chart out how each branch is going to grow based on these factors, including the nature of the tree itself. So yeah, I do think that the tree is a very good image for the kind of time and causality we're talking about.
And again, right, those buds on that tree, right, there's a future waiting there, right? Leaves or new branches or whatever's coming out of those buds. I'm not a botanist. It's I just want to emphasize this idea. We are thinking of a future, even if we take that future to be qualitatively different from the past and the present. And really what's qualitatively different about it is it ain't there yet.
Right.
Wyrd is what is, and Verðandi is what's becoming, or I would like to use some kind of a different term, but I think that works. Is what's becoming. Future is what ain't yet. Right. So it's not there, but it's what we are always looking at. And so you can't say that we don't think about the future, that we don't have the future somehow. We do. We just have it differently.
It's impossible to survive as a human being without having that sense of futurity.
Correct. And maybe I'm harping on something that, only a couple of people believed who aren't around anymore much. But whatever, I think it's of some importance because these people who gave me a hard time about it in the past were not entirely stupid people, and they were heathens. So.
Yeah. I think one other idea, and kind of to complete the bow shots thing too, one other concept that would be worth talking about is the water element.
Yeah.
To kind of tie in the Norns too, because they're applying the water to the tree. So you have obviously the tree as kind of like the symbol of time and being and becoming. So what do you guys make of like the water element?
So, and I would think so. We've got the well, the tree, we got Norns, right?
Mhm.
I have tended to think in terms of the tree is more sort of being and the well is more sort of time. And so when the Norns are taking the water from the well or the mud or whatever and applying it to the tree, what they're doing is they are incorporating time into being. And I think we could say, like, when we look back at a couple stanzas ago with the creation of people and how they first came into being without Orlog, right? That's sort of a being without time.
Yes.
And the Norns are the ones who, time comes from and with them. Time with all of its good and bad things. And the most obvious ones are probably bad. Well, we were just talking about Skuld and death. And so for everyone, the future is kind of scary. So I see the tree as being like what in another place we're told there are 9 worlds in the tree, right? Which we assume to be sort of all of the various realms of existence. The tree is where the stuff is. One of those worlds we assume is Midgard. Although then it's confusing because then it's growing out of particular places in those worlds. So, these images, just like my dreams, they never quite make sense. That's okay. I think then though that the tree is what is in the very, the things that sort of inhabit time are the things in the tree, right?
Yeah.
And then time is incorporated into the tree, and that's, obviously water is what makes trees grow. Well, and it's mud, right? So it's water and soil, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes trees grow. And sun.
And sunlight.
Yeah.
That
I don't
image
think
is
sunlight is specifically mentioned. But,
no. But that image is fascinating though, because it's kind of like the two in that way kind of intermix, like being becomes time as it passes through it, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
Really good point.
Yeah.
Well, and they are sort of parts of the same thing, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Really,
Yeah, it's like a yin yang type of intertwinedness.
Don't we also have, I don't remember which poem it's in, but some mention of the fact that white mud is healing cracks and damages to the tree as well?
Yeah.
Where that's found.
I'm wondering,
You're
I think
right.
that's in the Prosetta and the Gylfaginning, maybe.
Mm.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. So the tree itself is becoming damaged. It's damaged not least of all by some of these beings that live within it, like the harts and the goats and
It's browsing above, it's bull rotting and it's gnawing beneath.
yes.
Goodness well.
Very good. So yeah, this means that the Norns, through the application of this white mud, which we're thinking of as time, is healing the tree. So interesting thought there. Time damages each of us, each of the beings within the tree, but heals the tree itself.
Kind of reminds me of that where kintsugi or whatever, where you mend like a bowl with
like the
gold clay or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
I can see that.
Yeah, I suppose white mud is cooler than, plaster.
I was actually thinking
more
of it as
natural, yeah.
plaster, right? Because think about the fact that bandages are still called plasters.
Yep.
In some languages, in German, and Pflaster.
England.
And
in
won't
England,
they
right?
repair like damaged trees with plaster?
Yeah, they will.
Yeah, I mean that's a
So
thing.
I think that's what we're
Again,
talking
not an arborist, but yeah.
we make no claims to be professional arborists,
Yes.
though we are talking an awful lot about trees.
Just cover that thing, but only if you're like 3 women.
That's right.
Yeah, if you are if it's 3 women listing, you can go and cover your.
And you're qualified. Yeah.
The rest of us, we can't.
If you're a dude, do not try this at home.
And if you're not those specific 3 women,
Right. That's kind of important.
Yeah.
Be cool if they were listing those.
Yes. So yeah. maybe back to the story.
Yeah.
We didn't even finish that verse.
No.
After we got and Skuld the third, we have laws they made there and life allotted to the sons of men and set their fates.
In the original, that's Þeir logðó, þeir líf koro, aldabornum örlög segja. So their laws they laid, their lives they chose for the sons of men to say their fates.
What's the word for fates?
Örlög.
Okay. So, hang on.
Þeir
And what was laws?
log.
Okay. So, clearly related.
Yes.
Okay. So, what do we make of the use of the term laws here? What are these laws they're making? I'm assuming that they aren't like writing up lists of laws for people to be prosecuted with in the local court.
You probably not, but I think that something that came to my attention recently is I forget the source, but this idea that after you die, you go to a domstol, you go to the judgment seats to sit and be judged. And I apologize, I don't have a source for that, and maybe we shouldn't talk about it without it being able to be related back to a reliable source. But I do think, well, let's look at the word law, right? Loch. It's related to the word lay,
right,
and layer. So there's something that's being laid down somehow. And I do think, well, definitely in Old Norse, loch had the same sense of law that we have.
Okay.
Something legal. So I guess the way that I've tended to interpret it, in terms of laws, is the same way as we might think of like natural laws or laws of physics. These are rules about how existence works.
Okay. So the laws are laying down, you're thinking, are sort of the ways that causality works itself out, something like that.
That's how I've interpreted it, but it's not the only valid interpretation.
I mean, certainly it at some point had that meaning. I mean, we get the word law in English from Norse,
Yes.
right? It's not an original Anglo-Saxon word.
Correct.
Right. And it's this word.
It's this word, loch.
Yeah. So clearly that meaning was there. I'm wondering if that's original, though. You say that it comes from something like lay. We were talking previously about örlög, right? Which is, the really way back laid stuff, right? The early laid stuff, the primordial laid stuff, something like that. Could it be that this is initially just saying something like they were putting on the layers to,
Yeah, it's possible. I know that in Old Norse, the word loch has that meaning of law, but those are all from sources that probably post-date the composition of this poem.
Right. Or it could be that the composition of this poem is one thing. The origination of the poetic tropes put together into this poem might even be another.
Yes,
right?
True.
They could be Norns laying laws goes back a lot longer than the composition of this poem.
Yes.
They got put into this poem the way that, this is probably going a little far afield, but whatever, that oral poetry tends to use sort of
formulas.
Yeah. I don't want to say standardized, that sounds awful, but conventional formulas put together in novel ways make good poems.
Right.
And sometimes the novel formulas are made and then passed on too. But this could be a very old formula.
Yeah.
That is simply saying something like, the Norns are the ones who lay down the stuff. The events, the things that cause future events, whatever we're calling these layers.
Yeah.
Right. And then we have either way, we have an interesting sort of a mirror between the laws and the fates here, right? So laws are close to the beginning of these two lines, and then at the end is they set the örlög, right?
Yes.
So loch and örlög, clearly these are meant to go together.
Right. Yeah. And that in itself is interesting. Like, are we talking about a kind of predestination here? We're talking about the Norns right at the beginning of the creation of the world, right? And these actions are happening in the past. Þeir logðó. They laid down laws. their líf kúró, they chose lives. Aldabornum örlög segja. Now that's interesting too. Grammatically, that's an infinitive of the children of men to say örlög.
So we might think of this sentence as saying, so, I mean, the way to put it together. So the translation I have here says, and set their fates. You're saying you should say something like to set their fates.
Yeah. Or
So
to say their fates.
Okay. To say either. So saying would be different, right? But we'll go there in a sec. So the laws or layers, whatever, that they made there and the lives they allotted to the sons of men, they did those things allotted and said, whatever, right?
Yeah.
To set their fates.
Yes.
Setting their fates consists in making the laws
and choosing their
allotting
lives. Yes.
Okay. I like that. That sounds right to me.
So we're not talking about, well, we might be talking about some kind of predestination in terms of like the líf kúró, right? They chose lives, but the setting of örlög there is a consequence of the other two actions.
I guess, I mean, a couple of ways that I think you could look at this, and I'm not necessarily going to say which one I prefer. The one way is sort of what you're saying, that this just simply says they said what things were laid down, they allotted their lives, they made this decision, there it is, right? The other way is to think of them as being like the doers of the process of taking the things that we do and making them matter. So that in a sense, the coming of the Norns is the beginning of a kind of accountability. The coming of the Norns is where we can't just, we can imagine an age of almost childlike innocence where we can do whatever the hell we want as beings in the world, and it doesn't have a consequence. I can, wreck stuff, make people angry. Well, God's angry. I don't know, whoever's around them.
Right.
Do all the stuff, all the bad stuff, and it doesn't have a consequence. Then the Norns come in and say, this is just undignified. All right. You're doing all this bad stuff and it doesn't matter. Well, I got this well here. I'm putting these layers down in that well. Now I'm feeding the tree with them. Now guess what?
It matters.
Right.
So couple of follow-ons from that. One, I think that makes a certain amount of sense in terms of the chronology of the poem, because we're talking about the Norns just a couple stanzas after we're talking about Ask and Embla.
Right. And a stanza before, spoilers.
Yeah.
A stanza before we talk about the first war.
Right. But a few stanzas earlier, before the tally of dwarves, they're talking about how the gods were living in kind of this idyllic state too, right? Where,
that's when I was talking there, I was hardly thinking of humans. I was more
sure
gods, because that's what we've got.
But I think that, when we talk about, the Þórsameyjar that show up and kind of, there's an allusion there of it kind of wrecking the golden age of the gods.
Yeah.
Right.
Ruining all their fun.
Do we think that those are Norns? A lot of people interpret those Þórsameyjar as being the Norns.
Okay.
Those maidens of the giants.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, in the fate of humans, as we're kind of like, I think it has a lot to do with the fate of gods, because, if you think, and also a few stanzas ago, we were talking about how we got heat, soul, and sense from gods. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that this shows, this is a trope. This is something that I think makes our mythology a little bit different from a lot of different mythologies, is that our gods don't exist above these forces of time and causality. They're beholden to the same laws that we are.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a little less uncommon than we might think. I think there are a lot of gods who are beholden to something else in various world mythologies. But common or not, it's certainly important, right? Wyrd is the strongest, says the Anglo-Saxon maxim, right? I think that is a good heathen maxim. It's stronger than gods.
Yeah.
Gods are subject to it.
One thing that, same laws, different layers, one might say. It's kind of like,
right.
Yeah.
Which makes our theodicy a lot easier, right? We don't have to justify things like the existence of evil in the world.
Given an all-powerful God, because we don't have an all-powerful God.
Right.
We just have really fucking powerful gods.
We have very powerful gods, but they're not more powerful than these three beings of fate and time and causality.
Yep. These three beings who are also sometimes talked of as just weird.
Weird. Yeah.
Which is this sort of power of fate over time, whatever it is, over all of us, including the gods. Now, it still leads to the question, in a sense, it means that our religion doesn't claim to have answers for some of the questions that the Christians do.
Right.
But that's fine, because it's precisely they're claiming to have those answers that cause so many sort of problems for them.
Right.
Because they don't actually have those answers.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So where are we with this then?
And I think this sets us up well, all this conversation, because we are about to get into stanza 21, where it starts talking about the first war.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think the implication there is that there is a connection between fate and war, right? I have to admit that this is an etymology I've not been able to pursue, but the word for war in some Germanic languages like Dutch is örlög.
Yep.
Fate.
It seems to be the same word.
Yeah. Sounds very close, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I hadn't quite realized that until I looked at a Boer War medal.
Right.
So Anglo-Boer Oorlog. I'm like, what?
Yep.
Interesting.
So, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if it's the same word. I can't imagine what else it would be.
No. More to come. I'll look it up.
Yep.
Look it up in Picorni, and
if we have to go back and edit this out, because we've already had one linguistic thing for Ritter, we can't have two in the same episode. If we have
ruin
to
my
edit it
reputation.
out, we'll do that.
Okay.
It'll be too much.
It'll be too much.
It's at the very least uncanny, though.
It is an uncanny resemblance, right?
Yeah.
I think you have the same. Yeah, you do have the same word in Old Frisian, örlög,
Yeah.
meaning war. So,
which makes it a fairly old word.
Right.
I mean, Middle Ages anyway, which makes it, I guess, more likely to be the same thing, huh?
yeah, I think so.
That's
So
curious.
what's the word that we have here in the Old Norse? Let me think. You have that.
Yeah, I do. I've been enjoying the fact, for you listening at home, I've been enjoying the fact that all of this talk so far about the Old Norse has been coming straight out of Ritter's memory.
Off my dome.
Now we apparently have to actually look at the text as opposed to his memory of it.
Thotmanic something fyrsti heime.
All right, it's 21. Thotman hon folof.
Thotman hon folkvich.
Folkvich.
That's
yeah,
it. That's it.
Yep.
Thotman hon folkvich fyrsti heime. So folk is the same word that we know, folk, but it seems to have had earlier a connotation of more like an army.
Yeah. My understanding is the folk was originally the army that is formed of all the able-bodied men of a tribe, right? As opposed to, say, a drift or something, which is a smaller, an army formed from a smaller number.
Sure. And I believe that it's related to an old word that means to gather. You have that same root, I know, in Lithuanian. There's a song in Lithuanian called Pulkun Pulkun Braliukai, which means gather, gather brothers, dear brothers. So the folk would be the gathering, but with the connotation of a military gathering.
Sure.
So Thotman hon folkvich, and weich is just the word for war or fight or battle or something like that. Fyrsti heime, Golveig og gerum studdo. When they studied Golveig with spears, and we'll get into the etymology of that name in a second.
Yeah.
Oki hol hars hana brendo, and burned her in the High One's hall. Thryswar brendo, 3 times they burned. Thryswar borna, 3 times born. Oft onsjaldan, often unseldom. Though hon en liver, though she lives yet, though she lives even now. So who is this Golveig, and why were they burning her? Gull is gold. Weich means like a wave or a drink. So gold drink, gold wave, something like that. And I've seen interpretations of this figure as a figure of mythology, that she was one of the Vanir. And I think that that name, knowing what we know about the Vanir, I think that that's a fairly good interpretation.
Yeah, and given the war that comes after this,
Yeah. Right.
So they just give it as gold might here in Bellows.
Okay.
Yeah, not drink or wave, just might. But
Interesting.
I'm not sure. Vaish's might, I'm not sure.
I'm not familiar with that etymology if there is one, but I'm not going to say that Bellows is wrong.
Okay. And mentions in the note, which this is, I think, a very popular interpretation and probably my own, that it's another name for Freya as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe more accurately, the name for Freya, since Freya just means
lady. I think that there's good reason to believe that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so if it translates to something more like gold wave, I guess you could draw some sort of, could be like a kenning for fire.
It could be a kenning for fire because you also have kenning associations and even potentially mythological associations alluded to in kennings between fire and water and gold. So you have like the gold or the fire in the water being a kenning for gold, and you have fire as being, some sort of thing akin to water.
Interesting.
Or it could be something like a kenning for mead, maybe.
That crossed my mind too.
Wine, I don't know.
Potentially.
It's Riesling.
It's Riesling.
No,
The
it's
Gewürztraminer. Yeah, it's got to be.
Knew it.
Yeah. Last time I had Gewürztraminer, it was a fight, man.
Stab it with spears was the whole thing.
Threw it on the fire, it kept coming back. It was so weird.
So the first war, Iheime, which means in the land, in the world, was about this woman, this female being named Gulweich being studded with spears and burned 3 times, and she was born thrice, often, unseldom, though she yet lives. Going on to the next stanza.
There's a lot of weirdness.
There's a lot of weirdness
right?
going there.
So they burn her, and then she is born again, comes back, they burn her again. I don't know what's going on there, right? I can try to guess, and now she's still around.
I've heard it described as like an allusion to the purification process of gold, where you're melting it multiple times in order to get rid of impurities, which I don't know. I think that that's maybe a little too on the nose, a little too material.
Yeah, a little too clever.
Mm-hmm. So let's go on. Heiði hana heito. She was called Heath, which I think is related to the word heath, right?
Well, with Bellows gives, quote, shining one, unquote, question mark.
Oh, yep. That would be related to like the German word Heito, right?
A name often applied to wise women and prophetesses.
Sure. Hvarstil húsa kom, she who came to houses. Völuspá. This is really interesting here because, of course, the name of the poem, Völuspá, is not original, but there is a prophetess, a Volva, who is giving this prophecy, this spa, and here we have the words themselves written here. So Völuspá, a Volva or a prophetess, really, if we're going to be etymologically precise, a staff-bearing woman. Völuspá would be, I interpret that as an adjective meaning like well foreseeing, well seeing, something like that.
Okay.
Witte hon ganda, she knew Gondors, and I think we've talked about the difficulty of interpreting that word before.
Right.
It has something to do with magic or power or potentially, potential, right?
Well, wait, Gondor?
Gondor.
So it's also specifically wands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she knew wands.
Wait, so Volva means Volva means
Staff bearer.
Staff bearer. I guess there's not a lot of space between a staff and a wand. Right?
True. But I think it's important that you're using the verb to know there, witta, right? What is it to know a wand?
Oh, okay.
Seið hon hvars hon kunne. She saved
Mm-hmm.
right? As she knew. That deserves some interpretation. Seith hon huchleiken, and she saved. I have to admit, I don't quite understand this construction, huchleiken. I know it has something to do with hur, so mind.
Okay.
How does Bellows translate it?
So where it's just mind she bewitched that were moved by her magic.
Okay. Var hon angan illrar brúðar. She was forever dear to ill brides, to evil brides, bad ladies somehow.
So like those nasty women.
Nasty women.
Nasty.
So as a whole, we're talking about after she's called Gulweich, and she's studded with spears and burnt.
Mm-hmm.
She's called Heiðr, and it's talking about her magical abilities, however we want to define that.
So what I have here is Haith, they named her who sought their home. So who are the they here?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And
is that the god still?
I don't think so. Heiði hana heito, they called her Heiðr.
Mm-hmm.
Hvarstil húsa kom, who came to houses.
So is it the they who called her Have that are coming to the houses, or it's not, or is it her that's coming to their houses?
It's I think that it's Have who's coming to the houses, because the verb there is in the singular.
So when she came to these houses, then they who presumably lived in these houses
called her Have.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
And we're assuming that we're still talking about Gulweich.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So apparently she shows up at
people's houses.
Well, first
God's
she shows
houses.
up at the god's house. They're like, yeah, hey, don't like you much, and start throwing spears at her. And that goes badly because she keeps coming back. And she still lives. So then she's going to people's houses, and evil women dig her.
Yes.
Bewitching people's minds,
Oh,
apparently.
well, what a thing. Using save, that bad magic that men shouldn't use and women should only use sometimes.
Right.
Or at least if men are using it, they shouldn't tell it.
Oh, and I recently found what seems to be a cognate to the word seiðr in Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah.
It was something like sidden, I think, where it just means magic, right? We don't get much context or qualitative
we still don't
flavor.
have an etymology for it then.
No,
Yeah.
I don't believe so. Some people have connected it to seething.
Yeah. That seems too easy.
Yeah.
Does it, so, all right, massive excursus here. In one of the Scandinavian rune poems, I can't remember which of the two. I can't remember which rune it is now. I'm blanking badly. But there's mention of something that is referred to as a grave fish, a grafseið.
Grafseið.
I'm wondering if there's any relation between this very similar, the seith part word.
Yeah, it's worth looking into. I have to admit, I don't know.
I have no idea why a fish would be magic, but in words.
I'm sure. Grafseið.
Yeah. I think, is that maybe sometimes the path of the serpent, right? It's the path of the grafseið, but it's really a grave fish. Since clearly I need to look something up here, this part can be excised.
Sure. Sure. We'll try and come back to grafseið, and I know that once I'm at home, I can look it up in Please Be Vigfusin and see what's said there.
Do an editorial note,
Yes. Editorial.
This is, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of stuck on the name Gulweich. I've had this idea kind of turn around in my head, like as kind of the things that you go to war over, like gold, women. I even had this idea of like the gold wave kind of being like wheat, so like food.
Sure.
And then like kind of it mentions homes too, so like all the things that you'd want to take from somebody, which is kind of like the driver of war, is like those types of things: wealth, women, food, resource. Yeah.
I've got some theories that are both kind of mythological and metaphysical here, and I'm not sure that I want to go into them here, so we might want to edit this part out too. But what the hell, off the dome. Here we go. I do interpret Golweich and Heiðr as being Freyja, being the same figure.
Yeah.
Of course, you guys know I also interpret Freyja as being the same as Frigg, at least up until kind of the end of the Viking Age in Scandinavia.
So like a particular aspect of Frigg developed a personality of its own or something.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say that. So, and as you guys also know, I am deep into the weeds in comparative mythology. So it seems to be a pattern that you have in Indo-European mythologies, that you have this trifunctional goddess, which is what Dumazil calls her, where you have a goddess who arises out of the third function, which would be the function of like wealth and health and fertility and sexuality and growing things, who comes to encompass also the function of like war and force, and the function of sovereignty and ritual and law and magic.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that Frigg/Freyja is the Germanic reflex of that goddess. She is that goddess to the Germanic people. And, we've talked a little bit, I know the four of us, about fire in the ritual, right? And, for our ritual, we have 2 fire altars, one of which represents this world and could be taken as kind of a third functional fire, the big fire pit. The other of which is the sacrificial fire and could be taken as kind of the first function fire, right?
I'd say, in a sense, both are sacrificial fires.
Both are sacrificial fires.
The one more sort of, for the earth, right? If we were Greek, you would say it's for the chthonic deities. Not, so we don't have to use that word.
Right.
But it's those sort of terrestrial things, right? Whereas the square fire pit is for the more heavenly deities, the things that you would think would be up.
And, I'm in my construction of that, of course, I'm riffing a lot on Vedic fire ritual, right? And in Vedic fire ritual, there is not always, but often another fire as well that kind of exists on the margin of the ritual space, facing like off to the side, whichever direction the enemies are believed to exist in. So in the Vedic fire ritual, where everything's oriented towards the east, west to east, this other fire is facing the south. And, it's kind of like a fan-shaped or an axe head-shaped fire altar. And I know that this is related, or this has been associated also with the Temple of Mars in Rome on the edge of the Campus Martius, which was facing towards kind of the homeland of the original enemies of the Roman people. And that would be kind of the second function fire, right? That would be the fire of warfare. I feel, this is purely my hypothesis, that Frigg/Freyja is embodied in that fire that moves from the round fire, the Garhabhatya, the fire of this world, to those other fire altars, and therefore kind of unites all 3, right? So we're talking about...
That's what you're taking that to be the bird 3 times.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you were intentionally threading that in, but I mean, it would... this stanza would actually back that up quite a bit.
It's like a wave of gold that goes from one fire to the next.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And see, in these 2 stanzas, there's a connection there between gold, wealth, right?
Yeah.
Between magic, which would be part of sovereignty, and war. They're all 3 connected in these 2 stanzas.
Yeah.
With around the same figure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is very supportive of that theory.
So maybe we'll keep it in. Maybe.
Yeah, I think we ought to. Yeah.
Maybe it's worth it, right?
Yep.
This is what you get when you noodle over these poems for a couple of decades.
There you go.
So I think that there's a couple of other things to talk about here. What is seiðr? Who are these Ildrar Brúðar, these evil women that she's dear to? When I first was reading this poem, I was interpreting it as, women among the gods, because that's kind of where the action seems to be taking place here. But that's not necessarily the case.
And I'm not sure I think that, so the first of these 2 stanzas is clearly among the gods. But then I think the second is sort of after, and she's off wandering with other folks.
Sure.
Who those folks may be.
Could be.
Right? Giants, humans, dwarfs, I have no idea.
Sure.
Well, it seems like, as it's talking in this translation, it says Mayan Shibu witch that were moved by her magic. Like maybe she's going out to these others and gathering up support.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just her against the gods that have stabbed and burned her.
Right.
It's her and these people whose mind she's bewitched and the evil women.
Yeah. So going on.
So now that's interesting. Well, no, we should probably come back after.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is gonna go somewhere interesting because the next stanza is gonna mention Odin, and
this is important here, and this next one is a stanza that I think hasn't always been kind of faithfully translated. So let's start with the Old Norse, Fangengo Regenol Rokstóla, which we've seen before. There, all the powers went to judgment seats.
No, you're
3.
Yeah.
I think that our translation is reordered from that text.
Yes.
So 23 is on the host is speared at Odin hurl, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. That's 24 in this version.
Yeah.
So Fangengo Regenol Rokstóla Ginheloch Goth Okumthat Gattusk. The greatly holy gods have talked about that. Hvort skuldo Aesir afrathgjalda? What should the Aesir pay in recompense or pay in compensation?
Mm-hmm.
Eða skuldo golden all gilde eiga? Or should all of the gods own this gilde?
Mm-hmm.
Which I interpret as being the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right.
That's clearly what Bellows is thinking.
What's the Bellows translation?
So then sought the gods, their assembly seats, the holy ones, and council held whether the gods should tribute give, or to all alike should worship belong.
Right. I think that that's a good translation.
Yeah.
And this reminds me, again, going back to comparative mythology, you have in India a story of a war between the Devas, led by Indra, and the Ashvins, these horse twins, right?
Right.
And what it's about is that the Ashvins are saying that they are gods as well, and therefore they deserve a portion of the Soma sacrifice, or they deserve a portion of, what's the other interpretation I've seen? The benefits of offerings coming from humanity. And, Indra's and the Deva's response is like, we don't know what you are. We don't think you're gods.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a war that comes about, and there are certain parallels between that story and this one, even though some of the details are reordered and reevaluated, but there's a lot there. So I think that we are talking about the issue of whether all of the gods should receive worship, whether all of the gods should receive the benefits of worship.
Mm-hmm. So Bellows has a note here where he says that this one and 23 and 24 have been transposed from the order in the manuscripts. The former describes a battle and the victory over the Wanes, after which the gods took counsel, debating whether to pay tribute to the victors or admit them, as was finally done, to equal rights of worship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way that you're going, taking it straight from the text, it's going to make it look like this conflict over tribute or worship is going to be the cause of the war.
Right.
But I think Bellows is right to transpose these, right?
Okay.
That the cause of the war is the insult to Golvaig/Haith.
Mm-hmm.
And then the outcome of the war is that this decision had to be made.
Sure. And I think that the connection with the Vedic myth works either way, because, as I said, in comparing these two different myths, there are a lot of elements that are transposed in terms of time, right? There's a figure in the Vedic myth called Madhu, which means drunkenness, that I think that we could compare to Kvasir.
Sure.
But his creation doesn't happen after the war. It happens before the war as a weapon to fight against the Devas.
Okay.
Right. So there you have a difference in sequence and a difference in value, but still the same motifs showing up in the war.
Yep.
So I think, it works either way. It might even work better in Bellows.
Does it seem significant to anyone else that we're talking about Freya in the verses prior and then go right to Odin, and then war being the context, like conflict being the context from those stanzas to another.
Assuming that Ulveg and Hathor are Freya,
Yeah.
right? Which I do. But
Yeah, there's a connection there from the beginning because it's in Har's hall.
yeah, so it's right there.
Odin's hall that she's studded with spears and then burnt. So you have the spear showing up as a motif, even though the spear is not named in it would be stanza 23 for you guys, stanza 24 for me, but it's implied by the verbs, right? Flyg the Odin let fly.
Yep.
Och I folkum scout, and like shot into the folk.
Oh, so it doesn't specifically say spear.
No.
Yeah. The translation here does, right? On the host his spear did Odin hurl.
Mm-hmm. And then you have, allusion back a few, or a connection back a few stanzas. Thatoren folk vi först i heime. That was the folk battle first in the world. Broten var borthweg borgarasa. Broken were the boardways, shields, I think it's supposed to say, at the fortress of the gods. Knato Völuspá Völuspá. What's Bella's translation there?
So, on the host his spear did Odin hurl. Then in the world did war first come. The wall that girded the gods was broken, and the field by the warlike wains was trodden.
Right. So what I like in the original is you have this alliterative phrase, Völuspá, the war-wise or the battle-wise Vanir, which I think is worth a moment of mention, right?
Yep.
In modern heathenry, the Vanir are usually seen as being these incredibly peaceful, almost pacifistic beings.
Right.
Clearly not in the original.
Well, and anybody who paid attention in the original, and I think this whole the Vons are pacifistic and nice, the Aesir are mean and warlike thing. I think that's gone to the wayside to some degree. I know it's been a thing, and I'm sure it still is a some. But clearly Freya, right, in her hall, she gathers up half the slain in battle.
Right.
And, she's definitely a war goddess in her way. And Freya, those boar helms people wore,
right?
Freya is associated with the boar. There's a reason for that.
Right.
Yeah. No, the clearly they're Germanic gods. They're all about war.
Yeah.
There's no like peace god here,
I remember Bald. I remember reading a theory that if you compare mythologies just in Northern Europe, Celts to Germanic peoples to Balts to, we don't have a whole lot of Slavic mythology, unfortunately, but that gods that might have nothing to do with war in either Celtic or Baltic mythology have a very warlike nature in Germanic mythology. And that this might have had to do with an event or a cultural shift that happened sometime in the Iron Age, maybe when the Germanic peoples first encountered the Romans and had to deal with them as a threat, that kind of the entire culture got put on a war footing, and that this changed the interpretation of the natures of the gods, such that war became a very semantically complex thing, and had a lot of different aspects to it that were touched upon by different gods. One of these being Tyr.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Tyr in Germanic is a very warlike god, but the cognates of that god don't have a lot to do with war outside of the Germanic sphere.
Yep.
And one of the ideas being that Tyr is a war god insofar as he is in charge of war seen as like trial by combat writ large, or as a judgment upon peoples writ large, right?
Right.
So war in a legal sense, or the legalistic aspect of war.
Yep.
Just an example. But no, it's very interesting.
So, I mean, these war stanzas come from stanza 20, where we kind of left off at fate. And so I think we kind of wanted to get to this, but like, why is war part of fate? Or it seems like that's what's kind of implying.
Yeah.
My sense is that if it wasn't for, so this war is something that happens because of a bad thing, right? Spearing some woman who has accepted hospitality in your hall is not good. even if she does end up being reborn.
Uh,
It's just not a thing to do, right?
No,
Generally, it's frowned upon.
generally.
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 And
I would almost go as far to say universally it's frowned upon.
my sense is that if there had not been sort of the introduction of what are we going to call it? Of weird, but of
Causality.
Causality, sure.
Yeah.
Of accountability in an important sense, I think, of actions having consequences. There would have been no war here.
Right.
Gods can just do what the hell ever, right? That's sort of this childlike golden age that existed before the Norns showed up.
So it's like the causality
Yep.
crossing over with will.
Yep.
And like one thing has to follow another because there's free will, because I have the right to choose. And if something that I do sets off this chain of events, then war is just
that chain of events happen.
It's just inevitable. Yeah.
And you see that same sort of sense of the connectedness of fate with war showing up in epic as well. I mean, look at the Volsunga saga, look at the Nibelungenlied, where the things that occur, especially coming from like a very ancient, very early decisions that are made, continue to have this inevitability of leading towards war, downfall, and violence, right?
Across generations
And across peoples. So, just to look at the Nibelungenlied, the choice of, well, I'm sorry, no, I'm going to go with the Volsunga saga. The Volsunga saga, actually, the choice of Loki to extort this last ring from Andvari, the dwarf, is what leads eventually to the murder of Sigurður. It's what leads to the downfall of the Nibelungs at the hands of Atle and Gudrun, right? It's what leads to this whole conflagration. So that's a good way of showing that, a very small act, if it's an evil act in this case, or a greedy act, will set off immense, terrible consequences.
Yeah.
But it's also a way of showing that once this thing is done, everything follows inevitably from that thing, right? That you get causality as a sense of unavoidability.
And it seems like a small act.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got kind of an epic butterfly effect going on here.
Yeah.
Right. And small act leads to downfall of many people across several generations.
All right. Well, on that happy note.
Hey.
So off the idea of, laws, fate, and the inevitability of war, I had this concept in my head, and I needed to look it up to make sure I had it right, but the 3-body problem. Which is a concept in physics when you're trying to basically predict the movement of 3 particles and like the inevitability of them colliding and the unpredictability of like being able to trace 3 of them. So I just think that's interesting when we're talking about the inevitability of war and the fate that is war, because we mentioned laws of nature earlier, and I think that this is kind of what we're describing here a little bit.
Yeah, you might almost call them like laws of causality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it's not just war that's inevitable, right? Many things are inevitable. For maybe everything is. I don't know.
Conflict or colliding or something. Yeah.
Or even the good stuff, right? The past determines the future. Whether it determines it completely or not is one of those philosophical questions, right? But in this case, sort of our example from the beginning of where we have the first sort of determined thing does seem to be war. Now, one might wonder, and this gets off in a funny direction maybe, but I'll go there anyway because we are able to delete stuff. One might wonder if entropy.
That's kind of
backing up a set. Entropy. What is entropy? Entropy is defined in a way that says that a state where the observable state can have more unobservable sort of substates or whatever than another is a state with more entropy. I'm really defining this badly. So, like for instance, a crystal is a state with very little entropy, while a A flame is a state with a lot of entropy, because a crystal has to sort of be in a particular configuration, all of its molecules. They have to stay that way for it to be a crystal. A fire remains a fire, even though its molecules are moving all over and changing and being broken down and whatever else they're doing, right? Releasing tons of photons and doing all that. It's so there can be multiple sort of underlying states. A gaseous cloud then has more entropy than an ice cube, let's say, right? So what's happening here, it seems, war, it seems, is a kind of state of entropy versus a well-organized, harmonious society. A well-organized, harmonious society is going to have less entropy than a war. So it seems that what happened here is that one act of whatever happened with Gullveig seems like maybe bad hospitality at the very least. Maybe she did something terrifyingly horrible when she was there, right? We don't know. We aren't told. All we know is that she has this name that seems to have something to do with gold, and they stabbed her and burned her, and she got reborn multiple times. And then she changed her name and wandered around with evil women and did seiðr and who knows what other unsavory things. But we don't know what the cause was of that initial offense of spearing her and burning her, which is definitely an offense.
Your description of entropy, though, kind of reminded me of the ultimate cause, the Niflheim and Muspelheim, like how you described ice and fire, literally.
Right. Sort of the two opposites.
Very interesting,
right? Entropy and lack of come together.
Jumping ahead a little bit in that poem, but isn't it the Muspeli that come and destroy the carefully ordered universe?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, very interesting.
That entropy.
Yeah.
Well, and how carefully ordered, right? So if this is definitely jumping off a ways, but the universe in the beginning, at least in Gylfaginning, that was fun, since the ginning in Gylfaginning may in fact be the same ginning and beginning, if we trust Jan de Vries, right? So the beginning, in that you have ice and fire at sort of opposite ends. It's where they come together that stuff happens, right?
Yeah. Right.
When we're thinking of fire is entropy, it's energy, it's moving, it's changing, it's all of that. And ice is static, non-movement. And we don't even have to get into these fun physics terms. It's just static and doesn't move.
Yeah.
Fire moves, changes stuff. Neither of those extremes is a useful thing on its own. It's when they come together that you get a world where you can do stuff, where gods and weird cows that feed them and whatever come into being, right?
And there's the paradox of eventually that the entropy will dissolve that too.
Yep.
But you can't have anything without that entropy first being introduced to that static state.
Right. So that sort of eternal state, let's call it, of a world of all ice, it probably just keeps on going forever, but who cares? Right. There's nothing interesting there. I mean,
it's lifeless.
Yep.
And obviously the middle of these two things is, again, that tie-in with water, which we were talking about, kind of being a metaphor for time.
Right.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well spotted.
Yeah.
Right. This next part we have to edit out because it's the nerdiest.
We keep saying that, but then we make good points. Yeah.
But all right, you've played Elder Scrolls games. You know that there's a whole cosmology there. And this interaction that we're talking about between, entropy and stasis, it's the same that you have in the Elder Scrolls cosmology between Anno and Paromai.
Well, and I think that idea shows up a lot in like fantasy and stuff too, right? If you read like Michael Moorcock,
right?
It's, the Lords of Chaos versus the Lords of Law. And really when either one is entirely in charge, it's bad.
Right. And Michael Kirkbride definitely read a lot of mythology and a lot of like metaphysics in order to come up with the stuff he was coming out with. So it's not really a surprise.
Yeah.
I just, didn't want to admit on the microphone that I'm drawing connections to fantasy cosmologies here.
Especially from gaming.
Gaming, right?
The next thing you know, you'll be wearing ridiculous fantasy armor and saying it's part of your religion.
Moving on.
We should read these. Get through this war and the resolution.
Sure.
So we've done the 23 and 24 flipped as they are between our versions, and then we have I guess that's the end of the war. part of it, because the verse 25 seems to be
something completely different.
Something completely different.
There's not a good transition here. I mean, I think if this were in a creative writing class, there would be a check mark or something.
Right. Well, and I mean, that gets down to the fact that a lot of this poetry is alluding to stories that were probably well known already. And so the connections didn't have to be explicitly drawn, right?
Right.
Probably already know what happened because
Right. Because,
born in this culture.
right.
We live in this society.
But
So I guess we could back up a second, though. Let's look back at 24, right? So the question was whether the god should tribute give or to all alike should worship belong, right?
mm-hmm.
So the answer seems to have been the second.
Yes.
The Aesir and the Vanir, or at least some of them, are sacrificed to now. And there's no particular evidence that the Aesir gave tribute to the Vanir or vice versa.
Right.
No, don't we have in other sources this is where we have the exchange of hostages?
Right. That's in the
Yes.
beginning.
Generally
And it's the ones who were given as hostages who are the only ones we know of having ever been given worship.
right.
Right. So if I'm remembering this accurately,
Mm-hmm.
Freya is not mentioned among the hostages. It's just Njord
No,
and
she was
Freya.
mentioned as being among the gods. You're right.
Right.
It's the ones who at least end up hanging out with the Aesir, though,
Right.
however they get there, that are given worship.
And that's a point I've seen in favor of the theory that Skuld Heith is Freya, because she's already there.
Yeah. Well, or is she? I mean, after that second one, where after that second stanza where she's Heith,
Mm-hmm.
where is she?
That's an open question.
Yeah, she's
We don't
hanging
know.
out at people's houses. Apparently, nasty women.
In
right?
the observable universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yep. No,
Because those other Vanir, where are they?
yeah. Well, they're in Vanaheim, dude.
Right.
Right.
It's not really observed.
Right. We don't learn about that
No.
place. Very
No,
much.
we really don't learn much about it. That's correct. And I guess it is always, well, actually, no, we're going to wait for the next stanza for me to bring up this.
Okay. So fun.
No, actually, no. We're going to stay with this one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, all right, to all alike should worship belong. It bothers me when we have these people in heathen. It bothers me might not be quite what I want, but I certainly disagree with these people in heathenry who think there can be such a thing as so-called Vanatru, right? We know that in various places, the gods who came from the Vanir, who we know who they are, those three,
Mm-hmm.
are also sometimes referred to as Aesir
Yes.
because they live with them.
Right.
Some of them married them. There's stuff going on.
Right.
Right.
And none of this is to say, right, just for the, 1.5 listeners who might, take some umbrage at that. There's nothing to say that you can't have favorite gods.
No, we're not talking about that, but we are talking about this sort of
Worship of the Vanir to the exclusion of the
the
Aesir.
exclusion of the Aesir. And this is often combined with this idea that the Vanir are like the original gods who were then the Aesir came and, I don't know, wrecked the whole happy older world order or something. Right.
And let's talk about that briefly, right? Because I've heard in the past, and I've heard a resurgence of this theory in the future, that the war between the Aesir and the Vanir has to do with a war between like either primitive pacifists, Neolithic farmers, or Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, and these evil warlike Indo-Europeans who came into the area sometime in the early Bronze Age, late Chalcolithic. I don't think that we can make that case. I don't think that there's the evidence there, precisely because we see this same sort of mythic idea cropping up again and again in different Indo-European cultures. Right, which means that it has to go back to the beginning of Indo-European culture, some 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. At least it was a myth that was shared by these Indo-European peoples that later went on diaspora and ended up conquering or merging with different original populations in different parts of Europe and Asia. Now, it might be that this myth was useful in talking about a kind of cultural merger between different levels of society. I think that it doesn't have to do with historical events or prehistorical events so much as it has to do with a mythological reality.
Right. And I think there's a few things that really So I often see it, even like, what's his name? C. Scott Littleton, the guy who wrote that book about the new comparative mythology, which is sort of a summary of Dumbledore.
Right.
He brings up that this myth where the Aesir conquered the Vanir is a myth of how ancient Germanic, Indo-European people conquered pre-Indo-European people or something. Well, first of all, the Aesir didn't conquer the Vanir.
Right.
The Vanir wrecked their freaking wall, and then they came to an agreement.
Yeah. At best, it was a tie.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So this idea that it's the Indo-Europeans conquering someone, it certainly doesn't reflect that. And as you've said, it's reflections of the same myth are found all across the Indo-European world, which would seem, as you say, to make it seem like something that goes back to the Indo-Europeans from the beginning,
Right.
not after they've been conquering, peaceful, happy farmers, which apparently is what they did, being the evil people they were, or whatever it is that's going on in this sort of weird pseudo history that some people are proposing.
Right.
And so, I think it's very clearly a question of different strata of society having a myth that explains is the wrong term, but that reflects the combination of unity and friction between different strata of society.
Right.
A society that works is going to have warriors and farmers in it, right? Just for two parts of it. Farmers and warriors have different ethics, different ways of life. They value different things, and yet they live together.
Right.
The one allegedly protecting the other allegedly feeding the other, right? And hopefully it works out.
When things work well, yeah.
And somehow you need, I think, mythically, a reflection of the differences between the different kinds of people in your society you need that reflected in your myth.
Yeah.
And here it is. It says there was a war. These people were obviously different from each other. Something weird happened to make them have this war. And in the end, they had to come to an agreement, and they did.
And they did, and that creates a whole society. And this is something that I think is, going on in other discourses about our religion holds within it tensions between different parts of society, different cults of different gods, right? There's an Icelandic author named Jon Hnevel Aðalsteinsson who wrote a book that's been translated into English as A Piece of Horse Liver, and it's a number of essays. And one of the big thoughts that shows up in there, was a big eye-opener for me, is this idea that in different Icelandic sagas, you can detect an undercurrent of tension between a cult of Odin and a cult of Freyr. Right. Now, let's take a step back, right? You look at a religion like Christianity, for instance, and in that religion, if you're on the side of good, right, of God and Jesus and all the angels, there's no tension in that, right? All of the tension is externalized. I think the fact that we have a religion where there is internal tensions, there could be tensions between the kind of ethics that a follower of Freyr has and the kind of ethics that a follower of Odin might have, shows a great deal more nuance, right? I'm not just trying to say, be rah heathen, but, let's face it, we all chose this religion for reasons, and we all think it's pretty great.
Yeah, I think it's better than the religions I didn't choose.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree.
That's why I chose it.
Right. But I think that's a really important point to figure out, or to realize, rather, that it doesn't have to be that the gods or the cults of those gods are always in, perfect harmony.
Right.
There is a recognition of internal tensions between different ways of looking at and moving within and acting in the world.
Yep.
And that they're both valid, they're both good, right? They're both reflections of different kinds of mythological reality, or different kinds of reality that in the myths are represented by different gods, that is to say, beings whom we worship and consider ourselves to want to be on the same side as, but that there can be conflict between goods.
Yep. And the fact that there is that conflict between goods doesn't mean that, your being on one side of the conflict means that you have to be kicked out of society or something.
Right.
Whereas with the heavily moralistic monotheistic religions, where There is one God. He has one way, and you're doing it or you're damned. There is often a turning inward to destroy an inner enemy because he's not thinking right.
Right.
There's no heathen inquisition. There certainly are Christian inquisitions.
Right.
Now, that this doesn't mean heathens all got along all the time, but usually they didn't get along for reasons that made sense, right?
Sure.
Like, there's a bit of land that two farmers both think that they own. They don't get along, which is a little different from, I don't get along with you because you think that the son is separate from the father, but I think that the son is the same as the father, right? That's, why
does this matter? Right.
Mind numbing to think of these things, right? St. Nicholas punching the Bishop Arius because of, homoousius or homoiousius. Come on, guys, stop it now.
It's one letter. It's a little one at that.
Yeah.
Just an iota.
Just a iota, yep. Although I suppose you guys are all on Nicholas's side. Huh?
Well,
generally speaking,
kind of. I guess we're all part of the same club. But yeah, I think that a religion that can recognize and assent to that kind of internal social tension, while at the same time finding ways to resolve it or at least ameliorate it, is going to, in the long run, be a lot better to live in, a lot better for the people, and is going to be more survivable than one that says that all such internal tensions have to be purged. Right. The only time that you seem to have purging on a religious basis is when, you're in Iceland and your society is nominally heathen, but you have Christians who are insulting the gods, things like that, right? Which shows that there's already a break in society.
Yep.
Right on.
All right.
Let's go on to the next stanza.
So, you going to start with the Norse?
Sure, we can do that. So it's the same couplet that we've been seeing before. Where have the loft alt læve blanded? Who had blended all of the air with poison? Eða at Jotuns oaths meigevna, or given oath's girl, oath's maiden, to the kin of the giants. So this is interesting. I think my interpretation of, blending all of the air with poison has been slander.
Sure.
Right. And then Oathsmey, canonically, I suppose, is Freya, right? Who the war was fought over.
We're assuming. Just to keep it clear, that's a point of our interpretation and many other people's interpretation, but it's not entirely clear in the book.
That is a good caveat, yes. But she's been given to the kin of giants, right?
Yeah.
So what does this mean? What's the Bellows translation?
Then sought the gods their assembly seats, the holy ones, and council held, to find who with venom the air had filled, or had given oaths bride to the giant's brood.
Okay.
So, yeah, same.
Pretty similar there.
And we certainly know there are instances of her being promised, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So, with the building of the wall.
Yep. And of course, that is, they might need a wall because they just had a problem with theirs.
Yep.
They had a problem, I suppose. And now, so this might be a retelling of that same thing. And certainly the guy who fills the air with venom and does this thing with Oath's bride, who would that be?
Loki.
That's right. So this is probably a telling of that story.
So Oath's May is interesting too. There's been a lot of ink spilled, or maybe just bandwidth taken up of who is Urðr. Is Urðr the same as Odin? Is Odin someone else? Is Freya associated, only with Urðr, or is she associated with both? Is Frigg Freya, etc.? So, interestingly, in a collection of Bavarian folktales that was collected by Franz Xaver von Schönwerth, that was recently published and discovered and then published, you have this story called De Meer von Woud und Freit, which is translated in my version as the tale of Woden and Frigg, right?
Okay.
And it tells a story about the necklace that we would associate with Freya,
Mm-hmm.
and Vod or Woden going off wandering. It's not 100% clear that Vod is the same as Woden or Odin,
Mm-hmm.
but clearly it's the same root.
Mm-hmm.
And the description there is, I think, enough to say with a fair deal of certainty that these are the same figure. That's probably a story that's worth its own episode, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Because it was a big eye opener when I read it. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there as a teaser.
Okay. Yeah, what do we take though of this? So and by asking that, no one here is going to have the final answer, right? Odin, Urðr, are they the same or not? I don't know. Urðr. So Odin, the name goes back to a root meaning basically the master of oath, right? Oath being the woad in Old English being this ecstatic sort of state that can be fury, can be rage, can be poetry, right? It's lots of stuff all at once. So Odin is the master of that. Urðr is just that.
Right.
Is this a case where we have a separate being who just happens to have the name? Is this a case, Freya chasing after Urðr? Is she, looking for Urðr, right? Being the wife of Urðr. And we know from elsewhere that Urðr is always wandering and she is chasing him and cries tears that turn to gold. Some people have added that when she cries them into the ocean, they turn to amber, but this in fact is not in the original.
In the Bavarian, it's pearls.
Okay. Oh, interesting. But whatever it is, I don't think we're ever going to figure out whether these are the same or not, right? Whether Urðr and Odin are the same. It seems likely. It certainly could be the case that as Freya and Frigga sort of disentangled from each other in the way that we understood the gods 1,000 years ago or whatever, that they couldn't have the same husband. So we have a little disentanglement there with one of them just being a shadowy sort of double who we know nothing about.
That's sort of how I always understood it, is that, if we're trying to make sense of this for this poetry's sake, like, well, if we know that Frigg is married to Odin, then Freya's husband has to be somebody else. If those are two separate goddesses, then they must be two separate gods. And I think that they're the same.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. I think that you could make a stronger argument in the Frigg Freya, but I think for the Odin, and I just functionally don't know what you get if they're different versus like it clicks into sense more if they are the same.
Right. I mean, I think that particularly with Snorri, Frigg and Freya are kind of they're given sort of different personalities. They're explained a little bit better, but the personality of Urðr is never really explained much at all. Linguistically, actually, something that you find in the place name evidence is that you have another doublet of another god. Unfortunately, again, a not very well known god. You have place names having to do with Urðr showing up along place names having to do with Ullin. So Urðr is Anglo-Saxon Wuldor, so glory. I think at least we were pretty sure that that's the correct etymology.
Yeah.
And Ullin would mean something like master of glory, right? Or wonder.
Unfortunately, a very shadowy god to begin with.
Right. So it doesn't get us much further, but it's important, I think, to just say that the Odin Urðr doublet might not be the only one out there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Moving on. Here we have our first mention of Thor. So this is Thor ein þar var þrungen móði, hann sjaldan sittrar hann slíkt fregen, ageng og skeiðar orþok særi, mahlol meginlich meðal foro. So I'll be interested in your translation there, Garrett, because this is using a different form or a different word than the version I memorized. I'd memorized for that first half line, Thor ein þar var, which would be like, Thor of one was there. This is Thor ein þar var. So what do you have as your translation?
In swelling rage, then rose up Thor.
Yeah.
Seldom he sits when he such things hears, and the oaths were broken, and words and bonds, the mighty pledges between them made.
Okay. So yeah, Thor ein þar var þrungen móði. So swollen with rage, or swollen with courage, potentially, mood anyway. So it's just a matter of him being there and him rising up there, I suppose. But yeah, that seems pretty interesting. What do we think were the oaths, the words and bonds that were broken?
So I think here the idea is that this is that story of the making of Asgard.
Mm.
And so in his notes here, Bellows just brings us to that, right?
Okay.
So Asgard was supposed to be, the payment for that was supposed to be Freya. Thor's like, yeah, that's not going on.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we know in story, it's much more involved.
Right.
Yeah. With mares and
things, which if we ever talk about that, I've got some interesting information from a potentially cognate myth from Ireland that also involves mares, but different divine figures. Okay. So then we seem to take a very different tack. So the next stanza doesn't seem to follow from the preceding, really. Weithon heimdalar hljóðum folget under heiðvonum helgum bað me. Ansar han ása skaurgum forse of where the walfors wittotheren eða what. So she knows where heimdalar's hljóð is hidden. Mm-hmm. Right, and hljóð we can interpret as hearing, although sometimes the translation I've seen is horn.
Yep, that's what we have here.
Right, so yeah, if you want to read the bellows.
I know of the horn of Heimdall hidden under the high-reaching holy tree. On it there pours from Valfather's pledge a mighty stream. Would you know yet more?
And that is the the first of the stanzas where we have that wittotheren eða what, which seems to me, to feel artistically like a big turning point where we're going to start to talk about, we've been talking about the beginning of things, now we're going to talk about the end of things.
Yep. Well, and it seems at this point, it's not even the end of things. At this point, she's gone from talking about what happened in the past. Also, let me tell you about stuff that has to do with you now. Right. Valfather's pledge, and then that leads into explaining Valfather's pledge.
Right.
Moved on to the Verðandi part of things.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, actually, that's a very good point. Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so we've just covered Urd.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When, I don't know, to Ritter's point about the would you know yet more, kind of like the fate, the Skuld aspect of it, like the beginning of the end, kind of like a knowing one's fate.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting here too how, I think how this is usually set up as in a narrative frame is that Odin is going to question a Seeress, right? We definitely see that in a very similar poem, Baldur's Draumar, which might be later. But this question, Wittoth en eða what, would you, plural, know more or what? Which almost feels to me like this is the Seeress speaking to the audience.
Yeah. The plural.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking to us.
See,
okay, so
breaking the fourth wall
here, I would like to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you further explain this to me, please? Like, what the heck just happened? Who the heck is Golve? We can start there.
Yes. Yes. We don't get those answers. We get other answers. So then I think we have a little kind of framing narrative here. Ein satt hon ute, þá en aldne kom, Yggdrasil och jauholeit. She sat out alone. Then when the old one come, the terrifying one of the gods, and looked in her eyes, and looked in eyes, right? So we have that root Ygr again, the awesome, the terrifying.
It's in third person?
Yes, it's in third person. Ein satt
Translation isn't.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
translation has it as if it's her talking. Alone I set out when the old one sought me, and the terror of the gods and gazed in mine eyes.
Right. In the Old Norse, it's very clearly third person. Ein satt hon ute. Alone sat she out.
Huh.
Interesting.
And then you go into what appears to be a quote of the she that's sitting out. Hvers fregnet mig, hví freisteth mín? Like, is that who questions me? How does Bellows translate that?
What hast thou to ask? Why comest thou hither?
Sure.
Yep.
Alt weet ik Odin, where thu auga falt. Of old I know Odin, where your eye falls. Mara Mimis Brunne, in the famous Well of Mimir. Drek mjóð Mimir morgan hverjan drinks mead, or Mimir drinks mead each morning of Wede Walfors, with what, from Walfors' pledge.
So apparently there's, is stanza 29 like 3 lines there?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So there's an additional line, not in either manuscript, which is conjectural based on Snorri's paraphrase, which is basically a repeat. So in the translation, I know where Odin's eye is hidden, deep in the wide famed well of Mimir. Mead from the pledge of Odin each morn. Does Mimir drink? Would you know yet more?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here we have gone from, she knows that Heimdall's horn, or hljóð, whatever that is hidden, where a mighty stream pours on it from Valfather's pledge, Valfather being Odin. And then we have a weird little framing thing, just kind of out of nowhere comes in here. She sat here alone when Odin sought me, etc., right? Gazed in my eyes, her eyes, I guess.
Her eyes, yeah.
The original. And then, what do you have to ask? Why do you come to me? I know where your eye is, right? And then I know where your eye is. It's in the well. And of course, we know from other sources it's in the well because he gave it up for a drink from the well from Mimir.
Right. That's why it's a pledge.
Yep.
Well, so valde henne herfóður ringa och menn fick spjólspaklich och spaganda, sa hon wheat och wheat of world hverja. So, if I recall, that's Herfóður offered her rings and necklaces, fetched spjól. Is that spells?
Maybe.
What do you have?
Translation here. Necklaces had I, and rings from here, Father. Wise was my speech and my magic wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Missing line, and then widely I saw over all the world.
Yeah, it's weird how wide the word meaning widely is kind of repeated, like wide and wide. Sa hon wheat och wheat of world hverja. So here we start to get to, things are getting a little dark. Man, that's so useful as a not a framing device, but as a interpretative device.
Like a lens, yeah.
For the poem.
But yeah, I don't know, because then again, if Verðandi were to start here where we're stopping it, or Skuld were to start here where we're stopping, then Verðandi would be definitively the smallest portion of the poem.
And if you think about it,
it's the smallest portion of reality.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It would kind of.
Yeah. I was thinking that too, right? Because the past is big.
Right. We've covered everything from the beginning to, and then now
the future is
very
big.
Brief.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Right.
And then this should happen.
And it's so this is a connection to the poem Baldur's Draumar, where we're about to start talking about the death of Baldur, and it's unclear in the poem whether that's happened yet or whether that's what she's foreseeing. In Baldur's Draumar, because Baldur's having these bad dreams, that's why Odin goes and he consults the Seeress.
And she definitely is foreseeing it.
So it could be, right there, after we talk about the Valkyries, that's the end of Verðandi, and we're going into Skuld.
Yeah.
That is okay.
I think, that's like a layer to it. I also kind of think that they're all kind of, like we're talking about true in alio tempore right now, like all three kind of weaving together. Because we are kind of like already getting into like the future-looking Skuld aspect. It is, one might argue, like something that is just kind of an always unfolding element of being, and then
always present.
Yeah.
It's interesting here too how you have a how the present tense and the past tense are used here. Right? Everything up to Thorein Tharwar Thrungen Móði, whether it's war or wa, it's a past tense of a verb, right? And then immediately after that, it switches to the present tense. And it continues to be in the present tense throughout the end of the poem.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
as we discussed, our future tense is just a modified present.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it holds.
Thank you for listening to the North Star Podcast. For more information about us, visit oxentoft.com. That is AXENTOFT.com. thof.com. In our next episode, to be published on September 11th, we will conclude our conversation of the poem Völuspá.